This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out.
Get ready for certified USDA prime gun stuff on the GunGuyTV podcast.
Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Now, under normal circumstances, I might be talking about what's going on with the legal framework of the Second Amendment right now, what's happening at the Ninth Circuit, what's happening at the Supreme Court, what's happening in various and sundry states as they pass Second Amendment sanctuary legislation, open carry legislation, constitutional carry laws, and so on. But the truth is, you can get that from the news every day, and there are 80 bazillion commentators commentating on those kinds of things. So rather than opine on the various things going on right now within the battle between Second Amendment advocacy groups and state legislatures and governors who are in favor of the Second Amendment and the Biden administration who wants to destroy it, I thought we'd just talk about something more fun. I hope you don't mind. Now, I was going to do this podcast yesterday because it was Father's Day, and I thought this is a great podcast for Father's Day, but frankly, I just wanted to enjoy my Father's Day, so I did that instead. And so I'm going to do the Father's Day podcast a day late. So consider this Happy Father's Day +1. Now, before I get started, let me remind you that this podcast is typically about an hour long, right around there. The first half an hour of which is available publicly on your favorite podcast player. The second half an hour appears on GunGuyTV Crew on Patreon. So it's available for the GunGuyTV Crew members only for the second half, and that you'll find on Patreon. And by the way, I should mention that tomorrow, the 22nd, for GunGuyTV Crew, we have the first ever Second Amendment virtual conference going on. That'll be in the evening on the 22nd at 6 p.m. It's a virtual conference. You don't have to physically be there. All you have to do is be a member of the GunGuyTV Crew, and you can sign up on Patreon. Sam Paredes from Gun Owners of California will be joining me specifically so that you can ask him questions. And it is a conference. It's not where you have to type in questions. You'll be able to actually ask the question yourself, and Sam will answer them. You'll be able to ask me questions too, although I'm not the expert in much of anything, but I'll certainly answer questions, and Sam will be there to do that. That's at 6 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, June 22nd, for GunGuyTV Crew. I will put a link in the description in case you'd like to sign up for the crew, and then you can attend that. We'll be doing those quite often. At least once a month, we'll have a special guest, and we'll do a Second Amendment virtual conference where you can ask that person questions directly. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Well, let's get on with the podcast. I was thinking about Father's Day, and one of the things we don't talk about often enough, I think, in the Second Amendment community is how incredibly important the Second Amendment is to our culture, and going from parents to children and grandparents to children and so on. So I thought I would relate to you how I got involved in shooting and hunting and the shooting sports, and how my kids did, and how that has been passed down from generation to generation within my family. So let's talk about that, because it may be very similar to the way you came into the Second Amendment and the advantages of gun ownership, or maybe not. But I think it's certainly something kind of cool to relate. So I'm going to do that, and we'll see how similar my childhood was, or my kids for that matter, to yours. When I was a kid, and I should clarify that I was born in the 1950s. So when I was a kid in the 1960s, my dad was a deputy sheriff and an avid outdoorsman. One of the first things he wanted me to do was to learn how to shoot. Now, I also learned how to do a great many other things, but shooting was one of them. I remember the very first gun I ever got to shoot, oddly enough, was a .22 caliber revolver. A lot of folks will start people off on a .22 rifle, but for some reason I started with a revolver. I don't know why. My dad had a little Colt Frontier Scout, I think is what it was called. It was a single-action .22 revolver, and it was really, really cool. It looked like the old Colt Army kind of revolver. So I loved it as a kid because I had watched a lot of John Wayne movies, and I liked the Lone Ranger TV show, and Westerns were a big deal back then. So having this single action gun to learn from was pretty cool. And then sometime later, he bought me an Ithaca Model 49 single-shot 22 rifle. I think it's a Model 49. I still have it. It isn't mine anymore. I gave it to my son. It belongs to him, my son Nick. But back to the revolver very quickly. I learned that you could get powder burns from a revolver. And the way I learned that is before he could stop me, I grabbed the gun, cocked it, and had my support hand, wrapped around the cylinder when I pressed the trigger, and it burnt my hand. I got some minor powder burns there. Now, as a little kid, it really hurt, but I was determined not to cry because little kids don't cry, right? I think I was 5 or 6 years old. And yeah, you could rag on my dad and say, well, you got a 5-year-old with a pistol. How come you're not on top of him? He was. It's just sometimes kids can move faster than you can, and that's what happened with that. In any case, I fired those guns a lot with my dad, and I learned the basics of safety, marksmanship. I learned the ethics of gun ownership. I learned all of those things from my dad when I was a little boy, and those are things I learned in the field. Now, a lot of times people learn these things not out in the open like I did. They learn them today at the shooting range, but nevertheless, they learn the skills. I remember a poem that used to appear in the NRA American Rifleman magazine. I don't know if it was called American Rifleman back then, but I used to see this as an ad. And I don't remember whether it was a Ruger ad or what it was, but the title of the poem was, I think it was A Father's Advice or something along those lines. And let me see if I can remember the poem for you. I might not be able to, but I'm going to try. I tried to remind myself of it regularly, and I worked very hard to memorize it as a kid because my dad told me it was super important. So here we go. I'm going to give it a shot. Forgive me if I don't get it right. Here we go. If a sportsman true you'd be, listen carefully to me. Never, never let your gun pointed be at anyone. That it may unloaded be matters not the least to me. When a hedge or fence you cross, though of time it cause a loss, from your gun the cartridge take, for the greater safety's sake. If twixt you and neighboring gun, bird shall fly or beast may run, let this maxim e'er be thine, follow not across the line. Stops and beaters oft unseen lurk behind some leafy screen. Calm and steady always be, never shoot where you can't see. You may kill or you may miss, but at all times think this. All the pheasants ever bred won't repay for one man dead. Now, I learned that poem as a kid, and it taught me many lessons about hunting, but also firearm safety. And I'm actually kind of shocked that I got through it and didn't screw it up. Or at least I hope I didn't. I don't know. You'll have to let me know if you know the poem better than I. Maybe I did screw it up, I don't know. But I think I got it right. One of the lessons in that really hit me home, though, was the one that says, if twixt you and neighboring gun, bird shall fly or beast may run, let this maxim e'er be thine, follow not across the line. Well, if you've ever hunted pheasant or anything like that where you're walking a line, you've basically picked part of a field and you're going to walk the line across the field, you know that in front of you for a certain number of degrees is your sky. Your sky is only in front of you, and if the bird flies past your sky into your neighbor, your buddy's sky, who's standing next to you or off to some distance to your right or your left, you don't keep following through that piece of sky, because if you do, you're going to follow through the line, and that's what it's talking about, the line of hunters. And if you do that, you can very easily shoot your buddy. So you stay within your sky. I don't know how many times my son has said to me, "That one's yours, Dad," because that dove flew by, or that pheasant flew by, or that chucker, flew by, or whatever. But the point is, the concept is the same. You want to make sure that you know that you have blue sky behind the bird. That's one rule. If there's not blue sky behind it, don't shoot at that bird, because now you're too low. You might shoot somebody's dog. You might shoot somebody. And if you shoot the guy's dog, he's not going to be happy with you. And you want to make sure you don't follow across the line of hunters. And that's what that's talking about when it says, if twixt you and neighboring gun, bird shall fly or beast may run. Let this maxim e'er be thine, follow not across the line. I don't know how many times I've been hiking with buddies, and I've had to go through a barbed wire fence or over a fence or through some sort of sketchy spot where I might slip and fall. And I've reminded myself, you know what? Go ahead and unload the gun. If there's a round in the chamber at that time, which oftentimes when I'm hiking around scouting, I don't have a round in the chamber, but if there's a round in the chamber, it's a good idea to take the round out of the chamber before I make that transition over that difficult terrain. And that's what it's talking about when it says, when a hedge or fence you cross, though of time it cause a loss, from your gun the cartridge take for the greater safety's sake. So these are old lessons from a long time ago. I learned them as a child from my father because he is the first one to have shown me that ad in the American Rifleman, and I think it was still American Rifleman back then, I don't remember, showed me this poem and explained to me as I learned the poem each aspect of that advice. And it's carried with me all these years, and I'm in my 60s, and these are things that I passed along to my kids. Now, there were a number of other guns I got to shoot with my dad and my grandfather, and lots of lessons learned, and I'll talk more about those in just a minute. The world is indeed getting crazier by the moment. Every time I look at the news, the truth is, if you look at the news, you think the world is coming to an end, which I don't believe it is, but I do think that the less dependent we are upon the government, the better. And so we take steps in our family to make sure that we can take care of ourselves, that we are self-sufficient to the degree that we can be in the year 2021. One of the things that help us do that is to be prepared to have plenty of water and food in case of an emergency. And we've selected My Patriot Supply as our supplier for emergency food. I urge you to do the same. So I've placed a link in the description so that you can go to My Patriot Supply and check them out. They have sales on a regular basis. In fact, I think they may have one going on now where you can save some money and you can get your emergency supply of food sent right to your door. So check them out. We've done it. You should too. My Patriot Supply.
Shooting straight and always right on target. This is the GunGuyTV podcast.
Certainly there are a lot of lessons that you learn when you grow up around firearms, and some of them are safety-oriented. Some of them are camaraderie-oriented. You learn about the camaraderie that is involved in shooting and hunting and other things too, fishing and outdoor types of activities. But there are also other life lessons that come into play. I remember the first time I went hunting with my dad, and I actually killed an animal. Now, that may sound like a small thing, but for me it was not. And I noticed that for my son it was not. My son Nick in particular, but all of my kids for that matter. But the first time I shot an animal, it died in front of me. And it's not that I shot the animal and then I walked up and it was dead. I mean, I shot the animal, I walked up, it was still alive, and then it died right there. I saw the change in the eyes. I saw the breathing stop. I saw the life leave. And while that was not a horrific thing to me at the time, obviously I was hunting. I shot this animal for the purpose of learning to hunt and to eat. The understanding that a creature has life and then it doesn't, and that life is precious, was imparted to me more in that moment than at any other moment. It's something that you can have intellectually. Obviously, you can have an intellectual understanding that life is important, but when you are sitting there watching something die, the reality of that hits home in a way that it doesn't hit home anywhere else. I've never forgotten that moment. For my son, it was the first time I took him dove hunting, and he shot a dove, and it fell to the ground. He picked it up, it was still alive, and then it died. He never forgot that. In fact, to this day, I don't know, a couple decades later, he still talks about that periodically from time to time, and he'll relate that to people whom he knows who have never been hunting, never served in the military, never really experienced death of anything save the fly they swatted a couple of days ago, up close and personal. That is a life lesson that unfortunately I think is lost on our society today in a lot of ways. When I look at the news and I see people kill each other, and now, unfortunately, because everybody has a video camera, there are videos of it all the time, and there will be people shooting each other without regard for the sanctity of life. Perhaps it's because as kids they didn't go hunting with their dad or their grandfather or something. They didn't learn early enough that life is precious. I remember the day that happened, and I said something to my dad at that time, and he sat me down, and we talked about it. And he explained to me that the shooting of an animal was something you did when there was a reason for doing it. Killing was okay, provided there was a reason for doing it, but not just because. In other words, you didn't go out and just shoot animals just to shoot animals. If you were hunting, that's fine. Or if it was your garage or your barn or whatever was rat infested and you needed to clean out the rats because they didn't belong there and they were causing problems, that's fine. But just to go out and kill things for the purpose of killing them was wrong. Like I said, that's an intellectual thing I already knew, but the impact of that death didn't hit me until the first time I went hunting and was successful in taking some game. It stuck with me so much that even to this day, when I'll take an animal, sometimes I'll say, "I'm sorry, buddy. Thank you very much for your sacrifice." Now, that may seem foolish. It may seem sentimental. It might just seem stupid. But I don't think so. I think it reminds me of the importance of life. Every one of God's creatures has a life. And although that dove, that duck, that deer, that elk, that hog might not have the self-awareness, perhaps, of a human being, they still understand danger. They understand pain. And I think to a degree they understand their own mortality. Otherwise, they wouldn't try like mad to keep themselves alive when something's trying to kill them. You can see that fear in their eyes. And in a way, you can relate with exactly the way they feel. It's unfortunate, I think, that more young people don't go hunting, because hunting gives you the opportunity to learn those life lessons. Of course, it's important to go hunting with somebody that will actually take the time to explain them to you. I think if there was more hunting, if there were more camaraderie in hunting and fishing and those kind of things, and getting away from the video games and getting away from the graphic movies and that kind of stuff, that people might have a deeper understanding of life and a greater appreciation for it. I know that it certainly affected me that way. It certainly affected my kids that way. And hearing my father at the time, who's unfortunately long dead, explain it to me, I know that it affected him that way and that he learned that from his dad. And I've been hunting with my grandfathers and my dad and uncles and so on many times, and each one of them seemed to relate that in a very similar way. Some of the guys that I hunted with were World War II veterans because they were great uncles or whatever. And even World War II veterans would explain these things to me when they were combat veterans in a war where they took a lot of life from a lot of people. So it is a valuable thing, I think, to go fishing and hunting, not for the purpose of killing something, but you learn the skill of being able to feed yourself in this way, being able to provide for your family in this way. I think in that sense, it's just as valuable a skill as it is to learn how to garden and learn how to grow your own food. At the same time, though, I think it is a connection that you get with the sanctity of life that you cannot normally get in any other way. I've never been a veteran, so I don't know what it is like to be in a war, and I'm very grateful not to know that. And as a result, I'm extremely thankful for veterans because they volunteered, particularly in today's world, they volunteer to go do those things, and that deserves an enormous amount of respect. And so I have a lot of gratitude and respect for them. I cannot connect with what they've experienced because I haven't. They have, and so I can't relate that. But from the standpoint of being a lifelong outdoorsman and lifelong hunter, I can tell you I've learned quite a bit about the sanctity of life from hunting and, frankly, from fishing and other things. I don't take the death of that animal that I took for food lightly. And I think we should learn not to take life lightly and the death of creatures, whether they be human beings or animals, lightly. We should instead see the value there. And hunting has taught me that. I learned that as a kid. Well, anyway, to move on to some other subjects, I'll tell you a little bit about some experiences I had with my grandfather and my dad here in just a minute. Obviously, it costs money to produce and syndicate a podcast and produce and publish videos and have a website and all these other things. And so I do ask people to support GunGuyTV in any way they can. One way you can do that, frankly, is by shopping using our Amazon link. Now, I've had people say, yeah, but Amazon is a gun-unfriendly company. That's what they'll say. They're unfriendly to guns. And you know what? You're right. But just like Robin Hood, we pick Amazon's pocket every month, and then we take that money and we use it to fight the battle for your Second Amendment rights. So let us be Robin Hood a little bit, would you? If you're going to shop Amazon anyway, use our Amazon link to do that. You'll find it in the description, but at the same time, you can also find that link on our website at GunGuy.tv. You'll either find it on I think there's 2 or 3 different Amazon banners on that website, but you can also go to one of the menu selections at the top of the website, discounts on gear, and that will take you to a page where you'll see all kinds of affiliate relationships where you can buy different gear and benefit GunGuyTV, and one of those is Amazon. So please do use our Amazon link. It doesn't matter what you buy. It can be gun-related or anything else. It costs you absolutely nothing. Everything for you is exactly the same. The only difference is Amazon pays us a small marketing fee, basically, so it makes a little bit of money for GunGuyTV. So please do use our Amazon link.
This podcast needs your help. Send your entire wallet to The Gun Guy, 1313 Mockingbird Lane, Transylvania.
As I was getting ready to do this podcast, I started thinking about the number of guns I've actually shot with my dad. I started out, as I said, with a little Colt single action. I think it was a Colt Frontier Scout or Scout Frontier or something. I think it was a Frontier Scout, little .22 revolver. What a wonderful little gun. And then the Ithaca Model 49, which he bought for me when I was a little kid. I wasn't allowed to take it out on my own until I got a little older, but it hung over the mantle for a while. And then at my grandfather's house, it hung up on a rack on the wall for a while, and then he would allow me to shoot it only when he was with me. When I got a little older, my dad had an Italian Carcano. And if I remember correctly, and forgive me, I didn't have the time to look today, but I think the Carcano was chambered in a number of different calibers. There was a 6.5, I think. And there were a couple of different versions of 7mm. So if you know the Carcano really well, please put that in the comments if you happen to be listening to the video version of this on YouTube or Rumble or BitChute or something. But I think he had a 7mm Carcano, and among the 7mm, it seems to me, again, if memory serves me correctly, so if I'm wrong, please forgive me and correct me in the comments, but I think there was a 7mm Carcano cartridge, but also they were chambered at some time or another in 7mm Mauser. Now, I couldn't tell you which one my dad's was chambered in. I really don't know. But I'm fairly certain it was a 7mm Carcano, and I do know this. As a kid, that thing, every time I fired it, thumped the tar out of me. It really did. But, you know, as a result, I was talking with my buddy Pete about this the other day. We grew up, he and I, both shooting 30-06s and things that kick, 12-gauge shotguns and that kind of stuff, and shooting revolvers and 357 Magnum revolvers and 41 Magnums and stuff like that. And so as a result, a 9mm means nothing to me. A 38 is not much recoil when it comes to handguns, and a 30-30 is not a big deal, and certainly an AR doesn't have any recoil at all, because we were accustomed to shooting these bolt guns, rifles, the old military ones like the Carcano and so on. And then my dad had a 30-30, and I think it was a Winchester, but I don't remember. And then he did have a 30-06 as well, and I remember shooting that on a number of occasions, and I couldn't tell you what particular make or model it was because I don't remember. It was a bolt gun in 30-06. And I loved that thing, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I love the 30-06 cartridge and why I have as my hunting rifle is a 30-06. I could have chosen a 308, I know, but I didn't. I picked the 30-06. It's a little bit more beef to it, not much. And at the same time, I think a little of the nostalgia sort of snuck up and grabbed me, and so I bought the 30-06. And then my dad had a couple of 12-gauge shotguns. One was a side-by-side. I don't remember what it was. We used to use that for bird hunting. And then at some point or other, he gave me a 12-gauge coach gun, and it was made by Rossi. And at the time that he gave me that particular one had case-hardened hammers, outside hammers. Sounded like big steel knuckles cracking every time you'd cock the thing. If I remember right, one tube was modified and the other one was full. And the two outside hammers, double triggers, I loved that thing. I sold it to a buddy. But it was a really cool gun, and both he and I and my friend Chris, my lifelong friend Chris, we used to go out and shoot that and have a lot of fun with it. It was a great gun. Kicked like a mule, but boy, it was fun. And then my dad was the first one to ever introduce me to a Ruger Mini 14. He bought one when they first came out. They were not the most accurate things when they came out, but man, they were a boatload of fun to go shoot at the range or go out and, we'd stick up aluminum cans. And back then they were tin cans, not aluminum cans. We'd shoot up cans and shoot at that with a Mini 14. I have one to this day, perhaps because of, again, the nostalgia of it, but I actually like mine, and I've done a little bit of work to it enough that it's very accurate. Didn't start out that way. My understanding is the new ones are extremely accurate, although I haven't fired one, so I don't know, but that's what I'm told. And then my dad at work carried a Colt Python for a long, long, long time. And gee, I wish I had inherited that, but I didn't. He sold it when he left the department. And then there was a Colt Diamondback in there someplace too, the 38 Special. So those are just some of the guns that I remember shooting with my dad when I was growing up. There were, of course, many, many, many more because my dad was, as I said, he was a deputy sheriff and he was an avid outdoorsman. He did prefer the Colt revolvers over the Smith & Wessons, and I don't remember why. But he did have a couple of specific reasons why. Now, oddly enough, he would probably flip over in his grave. I actually prefer the Smith & Wesson revolvers more than I do the Colts. I love the Colts. They're great. I'm just accustomed to the way the Smith & Wessons run, so I tend to prefer them. Either one are awesome, honestly, but my preference has been the Smith & Wessons since I can't remember when. His preference was the Colts. But, Chevy, Ford, or I guess in today's world, Toyota, Nissan, however you want to do it. But both are very, very good. And I don't know about the new Colts. So if you know about the new Colts, I've visited them at SHOT Show, but I haven't had an occasion to fire one. So you'll have to let me know if they're anywhere near the quality of the old ones. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't really know. Well, in any case, I will talk a little bit about some things I did with my Grandpa Charlie, who was my dad's dad. And the guns that I shot with him, he purchased for me brand new a nylon 66 .22 rifle, I think for $30 or something. I don't remember, but it wasn't very much. And he also purchased a Ruger Standard pistol. Now, you may know that same pistol as the Ruger Mark III or Mark II or whatever. The original one was a Ruger Standard. And he purchased that to take to the range with me, and that was the first semi-automatic handgun I had ever fired, and we went shooting a lot. He grew up in Chandler, Indiana as a kid, so he was a barefoot country kid and hunted a lot. So he was one of those guys that loved to go out and fish and shoot and hunt and those kind of things. And I was very blessed to have him and my dad in my life because that's where I learned a lot of this stuff. And we'll talk more about it. Unfortunately, I think I'm pretty much at the end of the first part of the public aspect of the podcast, so I got to wrap it up here. If you're going to stick with me at Patreon for GunGuyTV crew, please do. We'll get started with the balance of the podcast, the next half an hour here in just a couple seconds. If not, and you're listening on the public syndicated version, then thank you very much for all of your support. I hope you have a wonderful week, and wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.
You've been listening to the GunGuyTV podcast.